Welcome to the Sales Lab.
Now that we know a little bit about what Johnson Controls does, how would you define technical sales?
I think everybody hears sales. I'll start with the sales portion of it, because I think everybody hears sales and they think used car salesman. I had that stigma coming in, and so I violently worked to not be that, right? And it was very quickly that I realized that none of the sales engineers around me were that either. Like, it was just a stigma that I was completely wrong about, right?
Yeah.
And so when you think about technical sales, the sales side of it really comes down to fundamental things. It comes down to being able to identify problems for a customer. If they already know their problems or they don't, bring solutions to the table. Most of those times, those solutions are technical solutions. Fundamentally, like, this is like going to sound so crazy, but the two biggest things to me in sales is doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and then being an effective communicator. Like, those two things are so critical. And then the people that are able to do that well, they naturally build trust over time. And inevitably, what you're driving as a sales engineer is you're working to build trust with the customers because they have an option to go somewhere else. And they've got 5 other people probably trying to come sell them and educate them on the same things we are. So it really comes down to building a brand for yourself of when XYZ consulting engineering firm thinks of Lucas Motycka, what's the brand that goes with that, right?
Yeah.
And so people buy from people they like way more than they buy from a company, right? So the ability to build trust, build credibility, and be reliable are so important. Now, from a technical perspective, when I first started, there was exponentially more that I didn't know than I did know, right? And so I realized my greatest asset, and this is true with anybody, is to figure out who the smartest people are in the room are or in your company are that you can lean on. And so what I was always so intentional to do with customers, if I didn't know the answer, I would tell them I didn't know the answer. And then I would go back to what we just talked about of what makes a good salesperson. And I would work violently to get the right answer as fast as possible, and then get back to them and clearly and communicate that in a manner that was both professional and value add. Now, it doesn't take very long before you start hearing questions and you've already answered those questions before, right? And so you build proficiency over time. And a really interesting dynamic, depending on the customer that you call on, is you're dealing with customers that in most instances know a tremendous amount, right? So there's no trying to fake it until you make it. But once you're at a place where you technically, the fun part of the job is the technical, right? Because you start talking about, you start getting in the weeds with them on things, and you know that they have an opinion. Well, you're never going to tell a consulting engineer sitting in a room, no, you're wrong. This is the right answer, right? So the fun part is you know the right answer. You've built the credibility. You start asking questions. It's like, well, what about this? What if we did this? You almost lead them to water. So you're gleaning, getting them talking and getting them thinking, and then you're working towards an answer that you know you need to get to, right? Yeah. You can do that without it being technical sales, but it's a lot more fun with technical sales because there's really a right answer, right? Scientifically, in a lot of what we do, there's a right answer.
There's an optimal solution to a given problem.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And it doesn't mean that it's the only solution, but from a technical perspective, you can build a case to show why it's the optimal solution, right? I think one of the most fun that I ever had as a technical sales engineer was calling on consultants, right? And help the MEP consultants, helping mechanical engineers lay out a new central plant that was going to have 20,000 tons of cooling. And we're doing every iteration of chiller selections for those chillers, and the engineer has in their mind what needs to be done. You think there's a better solution, and you work sometimes days, sometimes weeks and months to do iterations to finally get to the place where you either willed them into submission or you've influenced them with credibility to the point that you can land them on the solution that you're wanting to drive. And I think for me, the last part of that I'll share is there's plenty of times the consultants would come to me. You talk about building trust. I'm like, hey, we have a solution for that, but we're not the right solution. Like, I would love to be able to do this for you, but here's the solution, and here's why you should reach out to X, Y, and Z to help with it, because they're going to be the better solution. Okay, I lost an opportunity to help design a job, but I built tremendous credibility because I understood the technical side of things well enough to know not just myself, but our competitors, and then know that I could do all that work and our competitor was going to win it anyway, or I could tell the customer that and build a ton of rapport in the process to where, hey, Luke may not always tell me what I like or want to hear, but I know I can trust with what he's going to tell me. Or I go by Luke or Lucas. Sorry, I just third person to myself and I said Luke. So